Good morning, second service. How we doing? Aren't baptisms so cool? I mean, I feel like whatever I'm about to say is not as cool as what we just witnessed. So, hey, couple things before we kind of dive into this morning's content. The first is, you should know, Katie and I did something that we'd never done. Spending most of our lives in Central California, we did something that we felt we should have already done because it's so Central California. We went to a rodeo. Clovis Rodeo. Some friends took us up to the Clovis Rodeo, and it was amazing, right? I mean, I was just like fascinated and thinking, no matter what the event was, I was like, these people are insane. They're absolutely crazy people. And if you've ever been to a rodeo, it's really a great people watching experience. But about halfway through the day, I realized that I was probably the one people were watching because I'm the one I'm in flip-flops and shorts. Like, I was just not the right guy for that. I wasn't dressed appropriately. It felt a little awkward, but it was fantastic. It was super fun. Hey, the other thing you need to know is that on Friday night, we are doing this grill and chill kind of marriage night. It's basically a date night for $40. We're going to have catered barbecue, fun stuff for childcare. I think even we're giving away to one lucky couple. I don't know how exactly you can win this, but I do know we're giving away a night at the Darling. So it's going to be a great time just hanging out with other couples and just enjoying an evening for $40, really childcare and food alone. You are just not you can't even do that at Chipotle. So like this is gonna be a great experience. So I hope you'll join us. It's really easy to sign up. Just on the patio right after the service, there's a table. We'll have some staff there. They'll get you signed up. Or if you don't want to wait and you don't want to listen to me, there's a little QR code in the seat back in front of you. You can just sort of scan that and kind of figure it out online, follow the steps, all of that. So yeah, love to have you join us. With that said, I want to talk to you about a poet. The poet's name is a 19th century poet. His name's William Ernest Henley. And chances are you've not heard of William Ernest Henley, but you might know or be at least familiar with the last 14 words of his most famous poem. It's titled Invictus, which is Latin for unconquered or undefeatable. And Henley wrote Invictus. It's kind of fascinating. He's in his early 20s. He's lying in a hospital bed. He's suffering from tuberculosis of the bone, which is also called Pott's disease. And ultimately, it would lead to him having his leg amputated below his knee. And so all of this is happening, and this is when Henley writes Invictus, and the most famous last 14 words. And here they are. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. Inspiring, yes? Right? I mean, here this guy is. He's near death, legs being amputated, lying in a hospital bed, and he's able to write, I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. Life isn't going to happen to me. I'm happening to life, like I'm self-determining, I'm the shot caller, no matter what. This thing's not defining me, I'm defining it, right? I mean, it's inspiring, it's empowering. And I think it resonates deeply with us because having control over our lives, being self-governing, having autonomy that I can do what I want, when I want, and have the money to pay for it. And that's the goal, right? At least that's the goal we were taught to have. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the boss. You are most definitely not the boss of me. I'm the captain of my soul. I will live my life the way I see fit. Don't tell me to wear a mask or get a shot, right? I'm the master of my fate. I'm the one in control. Plus, if I really was the shot caller, I'd make all the right calls. I mean, right, this is literally written in the DNA of American culture. In fact, we know we've been given some inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And our translation of those words, right or wrong, is I get to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. Leave me alone. To say otherwise, in fact, is akin to treason against the American way. Shoot, even Dr. Seuss got into the mix. Listen to what he wrote. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer your life in any direction you choose. It would seem we are all on a similar quest in search for the same thing. Control. We like being in control of our lives. We like autonomy. But I don't know if we should like it too much. Because here's the thing. I think at times we really should start asking questions about control and autonomy. And here's why. Because at the root of control is power. At the root of control is power. We want power over our lives. We want control over how we spend our time, how we spend our money. We want control over what happens at our workplace. We want to have a say. And when we don't, right, we freak out a little bit. And it makes sense because we don't like feeling powerless. We don't like it when we aren't given a choice. We don't like it when somebody comes to us and says, this is the way it's going to be, right? In fact, that kind of phrase triggers many of us, right? It sort of triggers that master my fate, captain of my soul, fight or flight response, right? It kind of kicks in and we freak out. But if control really at its root is power, we need to be very, very, very careful. Because power is one of those things that we can't ever seem to satisfy, right? The more you have, power is one of those things. The more you have, the more you want. And this can become quite a problem, right? Because power can generally be quite intoxicating, right? And if you've ever been intoxicated, and I know none of you have, let's just say you've been around somebody who's been intoxicated. Intoxicated people, they don't make good decisions. Intoxicated people don't listen. And as a result, before long, they're surrounded by people who have nothing helpful to say. Nobody with the courage to say, no, don't do that. Nobody with the courage to say, you really should rethink that. Nobody with the courage in their life to say, I think you need to take a different approach. In our quest for control and power, our relationships evolve into something really ugly because now all a relationship is a means to an end, another arena for you to leverage control. In fact, in a couple of weeks, as we wrap the series up, we're actually going to deal with the idea of how we experience control, specifically in our relationships. But we're not there yet. So with that said, welcome to Control Freak. We are going to be super nosy in your life for the next 3 weeks. It's going to be really fun for me and really uncomfortable for you, which is the best. It makes me feel in control. So, right, it's the next 3 weeks really is just going to be the exploration of our desire for and experience with control, power, autonomy. And we want to ask questions like these. What do you do when you have the control? When you're the one in the room with all the power and control, what do you do? And what do you do when you feel powerless and out of control and your autonomy is being threatened? And how do the people around you experience your need for control? Have you ever asked, hey, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Right? So for the next 3 weeks, we're going to see if our poet William Ernest Henley and his master of my fate, captain of my soul approach to life are words to live by, or should we nuance those out a little bit? Is there maybe something, maybe he's onto something, but maybe there's another way to look at it that might be a little healthier that we could learn to chase after. But please don't hear me just saying you're all control freaks, and I'm not. This is really 3 weeks of me confessing. In fact, I told Katie, I said, hey, we're going to do this series. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to call it Control Freak. And her response was, well, finally, you're talking about something you know a lot about. I was like, ouch, right? But perhaps it's not just me. I think we can all be controlling at times, yeah? Don't you sometimes become a little bit irritable if things aren't done just the way you want them? Every once in a while, you can become a little bit rigid or demanding, right? Honestly, it should be okay for us to admit, yeah, that I can be like that sometimes, because on some levels, like as a human, we really should, if we're going to be healthy, have some input in how our lives are going. Like is healthy. It's safe to say then that pretty much everybody at times is a control freak, or at least we have some control freak tendencies in us, because on a really simple level, here's how we can define sort of control freaks. They're just people who care more than you do about something and won't stop being pushy until they get their way, right? Does that make sense, right? There's just someone who's feeling controlling. They just care deeply. Now, there's a problem, because some of you, it seems you can care deeply about everything, right? That's when you've become a control freak. But really, there are some things that you care about that I don't care about, and that's okay, and you can have the control and the power and autonomy in that moment. It's just not very disruptive oftentimes, right? Because maybe you just like your eggs a certain way. Okay, you do you, right? Or you got to clean the kitchen a particular way, or everybody needs to match, or your children always need to match. That's a whole other issue, right? Or maybe you park your car a certain way. You always have to back in, right? Those people, they're crazy, right? And nobody likes you, really. That's, because they're just waiting for you to do your whole thing, right? And so it's okay, we get it. In fact, I was talking to a buddy of mine, he's in law enforcement. He says, it's not controlling, it's tactical. Okay. That's what control freaks say. Surprised that hasn't shot me yet. But at the end of the day, right, these are controlling behaviors, but they're not necessarily disruptive behaviors, right? They don't really create conflict. You do you, it's fine. And it's why everybody, I think, to some level has a certain amount of control freak in them. And again, it's okay, it's healthy to have some say in how your life's going to go, but there does seem to be a line that when crossed, everybody notices. And we've moved from hey, that's healthy human autonomy, and we've entered the control freak zone, right? Our healthy desire to have a say in the direction of our life absolutely has a dark side that can create chaos and carnage, right? Because we can get really pushy, self-centered, easily angered, right? We always have to have our own way, right? It can look like that power-hungry boss who tells you what your opinion's supposed to be. Or it could be that manipulative mother who's constantly bombarding you with criticisms or prophecies of doom until you do what she wants you to do, right? I mean, these are major league control freaks, and there's no ambivalence about the trouble that they can cause in our lives. Maybe we could look at it like this. You know that Frank Sinatra song, My Way, right? If you know any of the lyrics to that song, he says, listen, I did it my way, and okay, fine. But control freaks sort of add a line to that. It's, I did it my way, and you'll learn to do it my way too, right? That's the control freak. And this battle, really, it can occur anywhere. Have you ever been on an airplane and you're sitting next to somebody who sees the shared armrest between you as a battleground, right? And you're you're a literal freak, right? And you're having this war silently with elbows, right? And you're just fine, have it. I'll just sit like this the whole flight. Most control freaks, once we've crossed into that sort of dark side of autonomy, do just about anything to get their own way. But maybe the best way for me to describe a control freak is just to show you what a control freak looks like. Take a look.
Hey, Jerry. I didn't know you liked soup. Hard to believe. This guy makes the best soup in the city, Jerry. The best. You know what they call him? Soup Nazi.
Shh. All right, I'm not letting you cut in line.
Why not?
Because if he catches us, we'll never be able to get soup again.
Okay.
Medium turkey chili.
Medium crab bisque.
I didn't get any bread.
Just forget it. Let it go.
Excuse me, I think you forgot my bread.
Bread, $2 extra.
$2, but everyone in front of me got free bread.
You want bread?
Yes, please.
$3! What? No soup for you.
soup for you. Maybe one of the great lines in television. Psychologists have a variety of ways to describe this kind of behavior. They call it a will to conquer, an instinct to master, a manipulative drive, a striving for superiority, an urge towards competence. Listen, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you call it. If you've ever been repeatedly roped in to somebody else's way of doing and being, you know what it feels like to be had by a control freak. And that's why everyone who's ever been in the presence of sort of a bona fide control freak knows the feeling, not only of being annoyed, but I think being demeaned, right? Because those are the natural byproducts of the control freak in action. The very act of someone trying to control you sends several negative messages. I don't trust you to be able to do it the right way, right? I don't respect your judgment. I don't think you're competent. I don't value your insight or your skill or experience. And you feel disrespected because the control freak seems to assume you know absolutely nothing. Control freaks can rob us of a sense of confidence and self-control. And control freaks have, seems like infinite number of techniques to gain the control that they desire. And some of them, on the surface, don't seem all that bad, right? Showing false friendliness, giving expensive gifts, making empty promises, sulking, shouting, nagging, being chronically late, withholding affection, bullying, badgering, and of course, just the classic bossing people around. It's easy to get sucked in to a control freak's vortex of power. I love how Les Parrott, psychologist, puts it. He says, listen, control freaks demand perfection of themselves and everyone else. Few things are good enough. If you live with control freaks, you know this too well. Their perfectionist ways set standards you never agreed to live by. Some of you know exactly how that feels. But here's the thing, and this is important to understand. For the most part, a control freak's desire to gain control comes from one place: fear. Fear. Now, a control freak's never going to admit that. They may not even be consciously aware of it. But control freaks are terrified of feeling out of control, probably from past trauma, all the stuff, right? I mean, it's all there, right? But because they're terrified of feeling out of control, they gather up as much control as they possibly can. Right? And this fear, it gets generated by a story, a narrative that keeps running in a control freak's head that says, life has to go my way or I'm not safe. Right? Control is actually a defensive form of responding to the world. Right? Control freaks do all sorts of things, right? Because they feel like they always have to play defense in a world that's constantly attacking them. And so they need all the control and all the power and all the autonomy to feel safe. It's almost like a wall that gets built so that the world doesn't come in and get them. The amount of control we desire is a fairly accurate measure of the degree of safety that we feel. Now, if you confront a control freak about this and say, you're really just afraid, I would just say probably don't do that. Right? But what you'll hear is, no, it's not fear. I'm not afraid of nothing, right? I just like to do things the right way. Okay, right? Don't be fooled. One, that's super condescending, right? And it's just someone trying to gain a moral high ground to justify control freak behavior. So give me a break. Don't allow that in your life. Right? In fact, I love how one French writer, Francois, and I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, so we'll just go with Francois. But here's what he says about this. He says, it's only imperfection that complains of what's imperfect. I mean, isn't that a fascinating insight? The only people who are super concerned about something not going right is the people that kind of aren't going right. It's only imperfection that complains of what's imperfect. The more perfect we are, actually, the more gentle and quiet we become towards the defects of others. Listen, the truth is, the quest for control, the quest for autonomy, power, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And it's dangerous because its source is often fear and a desire for safety. This is, it's an appetite that can't fully or finally ever be satisfied. It's a thirst that can't be quenched. I mean, you know what happens when you feed an appetite. It doesn't shrink. It grows. the more you get, the more you want, right? Being in control of your life, in most cases, honestly, is a very positive thing. To have some say, you have some autonomy, some self-governance over your life. That's a positive thing, for sure. But for control freaks, for some, the need for control, to control everything, becomes all-consuming. And when we cross the line and we enter control freak zone, we are actually missing the point. In our fear, right, we miss the point because control can make temporary progress, but it will never create lasting change in your life. And so the rest of your life will be spent spinning your wheels, trying to deal with your fear, to feel safe, and you're just running. I mean, it's like that hamster in the wheel thing. It'll never get there. It might feel like you get there, but then something else happens, and right, it's just round and round we go. But again, I want to reiterate, because this is important. Having control and power and autonomy is not necessarily bad. In fact, it's mandatory for our mental and physical health. Again, having say in your life, it boosts your body's immune system, right? In fact, David Myers, who wrote a book called The Pursuit of Happiness, he writes extensively about the idea that being able to self-govern in a healthy way, right, having some autonomy in your life, this is actually a key factor in your happiness quotient, right? Again, having the capacity to control your life does matter. But there's a dark side. There's a line that can be crossed. And oftentimes it's rooted in fear. It's rooted in a narrative you're telling yourself, or that's been sort of planted there by whatever, really crazy childhood or trauma, something that says you're not safe and you won't be until you have control. Because at some point in your life, you felt out of control. You felt like you had no control. And now that trauma just triggers again and again and again and again. And in your wake is a bunch of broken relationships. So to have control and power and autonomy in your life to a certain degree is super important and healthy and all of those good things, and it's part of the human experience, all of that. But we've got to find the line, right? Because here's what I think maybe even matters more than a quest for power, control, and autonomy. It's what we do when we have that control and power and autonomy. What do we do with it? Because if control is really about having power, then how we use that power and who is benefiting from that power, that's a really important question. What do you do with the control that you do have over your life? How are you using that control? And that's really what we want to explore in this series. So with the remaining few moments that we have left together, I want to look at one case study as we explore this idea of what we do when we find ourselves with a little bit of control, a little bit of say-so, a little bit of power or autonomy. I want to look at one case study and how this person used his power. And what's interesting about this case study is I want to look at the person who had all the power, who had all the control, who had all the say-so, who had all the autonomy. Of course, I'm talking about Jesus of Nazareth. If you're newer to neighborhood, we call ourselves a Jesus church, which means we believe Jesus is the center of our faith, that Jesus is the model for what it means to be human, and as such, we always want him to be our lead story. And so when it comes to the human experience, how best to navigate being human, we always try to look at Jesus, see what he did, see if we can learn anything from that we sort of take our cues from him. And when it comes to power and control and autonomy, this is really important. Because at the heart of the Christian faith is the belief that Jesus is the one carrying all the authority in heaven and earth, that he's got it all. He's got all the power, all the control, all the autonomy. He's the one. Right? He's it. And so I just want to look at what he did when the one that had all the control, what he did when he had it. And I think there's a lesson in there for us that will keep us from crossing that line into control freak zone, that'll actually allow us to reframe our life narrative for you control freaks that are terrified. And there's been something that's happened that you felt so out of control that now you're spending your whole life trying to control. I think Jesus says there's a better way to do it than run around and trying to lord over people and take your power and control and sort of manipulate the situation. He said there's a better way. So what I want to do is I just want to take you back to the eve of Jesus' execution by the Roman government. He's in what's called an upper room, we're told, at a home in the city of Jerusalem. He's celebrating the Jewish festival of Passover with his 12 closest friends and apprentices. They're having a meal together, and seemingly in the middle of the meal, Jesus does something so bizarre, so weird. He gets up and he washes his friends' feet. Now, that feels super strange to us because it's like, I'm not washing your feet. That's just not, your feet are disgusting, right? Like, that's not going to happen. But like, in Jesus' day, it wasn't weird. In fact, people traveled by foot. You kind of know this, right? People traveled on foot, dusty roads, wearing sandals, create quite a mess on your feet. And so it's normal when you entered a house, sort of sat down for a meal, that you'd wash your feet. But you wouldn't wash your feet. In fact, not even a servant would wash your feet. Scholars think that it was probably a role reserved mostly for the slave that would wash your feet. So this is what makes this scene so bizarre. We have the most powerful person in the room, Jesus, volunteer to wash everybody else's feet. I mean, this is like dramatic. It's unheard of. It's socially taboo. I mean, I could just imagine these 12 guys literally freaking out when Jesus gets up to do this. In fact, I want to show you how one of the eyewitnesses to this moment, I mean, he had his feet washed by Jesus. I'm going to show, his name was John. I want to show you how he records and kind of remembers the experience. Here's what he wrote. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. So, quick background, if you're unfamiliar with the story, Judas, been with Jesus 3 years, one of his first to sign on to be his followers, but he's kind of become disillusioned. Jesus just isn't quite what he thought Jesus would be, and so he sells him out to the Roman government and to the Jewish religious leaders. He just sells him out. And Jesus knows this, and but he's still, I mean, this is fascinating. Jesus still chose the one with all the power and all the control, all the autonomy, still chose to wash Judas's feet to show this guy incredible grace and love, not sort of come over the top, but kind of underneath to serve. It's fascinating, but let's keep moving on. So Jesus knew, and this is so important, Jesus knew, that's important, that the Father had put, and here it is, all things under his power. So Jesus is conscious of, and it's so interesting that this guy, John, who records the story, wants us to know this because this is a story about power and control dynamics in relationships, right? This is so important. So John's saying, listen, I want you to know, before we really get into this story, Jesus knows he's the most powerful person in the room and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. All things are under this guy's power, right? This is it. He had it all, and he knew he had it all. So what is he? I mean, John's setting us up. Now we got to ask, okay, well, what's he going to do with all that power, all that control? And here's what he did. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist. I mean, this is graphic detail of how a foot washing would go. And after that, he poured water into a basin, began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Jesus, what are you going to do with all that control, with all that power? His answer, give it away. Take on the posture of a slave, of a servant. I'm going to leverage all my control. I'm going to leverage all my power on behalf of someone else. Jesus leverages his control to benefit other people. He gave it all away. Control freaks, we feel like we never have enough. And Jesus says, you'll never not feel that way until you start giving away whatever control you have on behalf of someone else. I mean, just picture this moment. Just picture it. I mean, I've actually been, so certain streams of Christianity still practice the feet washing thing. And so I've been a part of like some of those like worship services where you like wash, you have your feet washed and you wash somebody else's feet. It's weird, I'm not gonna lie, it's super weird. But it's like humiliating, it's a little embarrassing, it's awkward, right? Like it's, you know, it's just so, you're like, people are judging my toes, I can't handle this, it's very like anxiety inducing, right? It's just all of that. And so you can imagine, I mean, it takes a while too. This isn't like, you know, just pouring a cup of water and off you go. It's like this whole very intimate thing. And I have to believe, like, up to a certain point, no one's saying anything. All they're hearing is like dripping of water, right? Jesus, foot by foot, toe by toe, ankle by ankle. I mean, again, I think completely humiliated. I mean, they were at least somewhat consciously aware at this point of how powerful Jesus was. They knew what those hands could do. They knew what those hands were capable of. Right? They'd seen Jesus do things with his hands that no one would ever believe. And there he was, with those same hands holding their feet, doing something that only a slave, maybe a servant, would have done. And listen, this is important distinction. It's a nuance, but hang with me. Jesus, we should not see this moment and say, well, Jesus, he's got all the control, and he's even washing the disciples' feet. What a great guy. That's awesome. No, it's not that. No, washing his friends' feet isn't an even, look, he's even doing that. No, it's actually what he had to do, precisely because he had all the control. This was saying, look, in what he called God's kingdom or the kingdom of heaven, he said, this is what we do with control. This is what we do with power. This is how you operate when you've decided that God is going to be the ruler and reign over your life. This is what love does with power and control and autonomy. It gives it away on behalf of other people. This is how power gets leveraged when love is the motivation. This is how power gets leveraged in, again, what he called the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. For Jesus, the greater the control, the greater the power, the greater the opportunity to serve. Now, the story's not quite done. So again, our author, John, this is one of maybe the greatest things ever written in the Bible. And it's totally unnecessary, probably, but it's just John. I want you to remember, John, he's writing what I'm about to read you as an old man. And he's reflecting on his time with Jesus. And he throws in a little scene that to me, it never gets old. Every time I talk about this passage, I bring this up because it's just so fascinating and so human to me. So nobody's saying a word, but then we get to Peter. Peter's another kind of guy kind of known for just being a big mouth and kind of awkward. And here's what happens. So nobody said a word until Jesus gets to Peter, and then we're told this. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? First of all, what a stupid question. He's washing everybody's feet at this point. Jesus replied, you don't realize now what I'm doing, but later you'll understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Okay, Peter, just settle down, right? Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. And so he's saying, listen, I need you to get this lesson. This is how we operate in the kingdom of heaven. This is how we operate when we're motivated by love. This is what we do with power and control. We give it away, Peter, and if you don't let me do this, you are not going to get it. You've got to understand how power works in relationships, and it works by giving it away, not trying to take it from somebody else, to have control over them. Then, Lord, Simon Peter said, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. And here's where it just gets super weird. Listen, if you don't know what's happening, Peter's like, Jesus, you can't wash my feet. Jesus is like, you got to let me wash your feet. Then Peter says, fine, then give me a bath, right? And everyone's like, what did he just say? Right? I mean, and I just love that this is in here because this is John. He's an old man at this point. Peter's actually dead. He's been executed for following Jesus. And John's like, I can only imagine he gets to this part in the story and he's like, oh man, do you remember when Peter, like that guy, can you believe, I'm telling everybody, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of what's going on. He's just retelling the story and he gets to this part and he's like, people gotta know. People gotta know, right, that this happened. But here's how it gets wrapped up. When he'd finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. And he says, listen, do you understand what I've done for you? Now that I, your Lord and teacher, the one with all the power and control, have washed your feet. Well, he's like, this isn't reserved for me. You should also wash one another's feet. Like, I've given you an example. So now you do it. You do it. Go do it. Not, again, some streams of Christianity say, well, then we've got to wash each other's feet. I don't think that's the point of the story. The point of the story is what do we do with power and control in our relationships? And we give it away. That's what we do with it. You want to know the remedy for control freakism? Give all your control away on behalf of others. Leverage your power on behalf of others. Jesus, motivated by love, gave away his control to serve. And then he turns around to you and I, It says, yeah, off you go. Do that. Right? Give your power away. Later, there was an early Christian leader, prolific writer, his name was Paul. I have to think he had this moment in his head when he wrote these words, but I would say as a summary of the lesson that we're supposed to take away from the foot washing moment. He says this, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility. Value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Well, remember, Christ just means king, so he's saying like King Jesus. Well, what was his mindset? Gave his power away. Gave control away. Who being in very nature, in fact, God, didn't even consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. And isn't that, I mean, the cross is sort of foot washing like times a lot. Right? It's Jesus, again, giving away all of his power and all of his authority to serve humanity. I mean, this is important. I mean, I think about it not just on a personal level, but us as neighborhood church. As we gain influence in our city, there's only one thing we should use that influence for, and it's certainly not, look at us, we're the coolest church, we're so great. I mean, have you seen our new fancy parking lot? Like, no. Sorry. As we gain influence and reputation in our community, there's only one thing we can do with it. Give it away on behalf of our city, to serve our city, to add value to the place that we call home, to say we want to take all of our influence, whatever kind of influence we have, and give it away so that the city is better off because of us. That's what we do. Our goal is never here at Neighborhood to be the coolest church or the best church or the biggest church. We want to be the church that actually gives away the most to bless other people. Why? Because we're Jesus' church, and that's what Jesus did when he washed feet and when he died on a cross. He taught us what to do with power dynamics. You give away your power on behalf of others. And on a personal note, if God ever sees fit to make you king or queen of industry, marketplace, academia, arts, athletics, whatever, so be it. If you find yourself one day and you're the most powerful person in that room, even if it's your living room, in fact, most importantly, even if it's your living room, you have a choice to make. You can leverage your power and control, right, to kind of lord over people, let the fear in your life that desires that power and control to rule the day. And as a result, your life will not be a story worth telling. And you will have a wake of broken relationships. Or, if you find yourself one day as king or queen, the most powerful person in any given room you may walk into, you can leverage your power by giving it away on behalf of the other people in the room. And as a result, create a story worth telling and a life that looks a lot like Jesus. Can I pray for us? Jesus, this is big ask. We love control. We love power. We love inalienable rights. We love all that. And yet you turn around and say, if you ever find yourself being the one with the power, with the upper hand, use it to benefit and bless and love the people around you. Help us to have the courage to walk away, to not let fear win the day, to not fall into the dark side of control, rather to have the courage to give whatever influence and control and power we have away to influence others for their good and their benefit, not our own. Jesus, we love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.